Hello, I'm Ajahn Jyotipalo. I'm Ajahn Jyotipalo. I'm Ajahn Jyotipalo. Welcome to Sauntering into Silence. Hello, I'm Ajahn Jyotipalo. Welcome to Sauntering into Silence. That's the name of my channel. And then, so I filmed, and then I kind of had this sort of dialogue with myself. And I filmed it 3 times. And the second time I filmed it, I was a little bit further over on the log. And then the third time I was on this side of the log. I kind of had the idea of doing this, and so I filmed it all 3 times. But then I could have gone online and actually, watched somebody or read the instructions about, like how to do that. But I refused to do that. I was like, I'm going to figure this out, how to do this on my own little program. And so it maybe took me a day or two, but that's how I learn. Like I have a solution or a product that I want to get, and then it's like I just force myself to play around and experiment until I get it. And that's how I learn. Like if I had just read about it, I could probably do it. But then if you asked me to do it again, I probably wouldn't remember. But because I had actually punched all the buttons and made mistakes and learned how to do it, or that created something like I never would have thought of, and it's even better than what I thought. So that's kind of the way I kind of learn, is that way. That kind of brings up another point too, where when I first started doing really thinking in terms of using creativity, and it can be like, however we're doing that. It's like, it can be visual arts, but it takes creativity to problem solve, anything. So like if, it doesn't even have to be in the arts. It can be, as a negotiator or somebody who's a facilitator, somebody in a business setting, or working in a kitchen in a monastery. You got to coordinate with people, so you're creative in all sorts of different ways. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the arts, but that's where I'm coming at it from. When I first gave a Dhamma talk, so right after I did my very, very first icon, that workshop that Ajahn Pasno asked if I would give a Dhamma talk at Abhayagiri, I gave a series of 3 talks called The Artist Way, I think it's what it was called. And there's 3 talks on that. Normally, if you give a Dhamma talk, if you're a junior monk at Abhayagiri, you might get 1 or 2 people kind of commenting to you. It's like, or questioning, like, what did you mean by that? Or, hey, that was a nice talk. That was helpful. Thank you. And that's kind of like what happened for me when I was giving talks. And after I gave that talk, I think I got like 20 or 30 people contacting me, either emailing me or calling, or just coming up to me later and saying, that was really significant. Thank you. And I kind of got this impression. I think I was talking to you because you're a psychiatrist, but I can't remember what we said it was. But I kind of think there's like 3 or 4, but I think I got it down to 3 points at one way of way people learn, the way people are intrigued in things. And one is just sort of like through intellectuals, like you read it in a book, you process it, and you're learning that way. I think there's a third that learn through sort of like devotion and like creativity. And so I'm that kind of person. Like I learned by actually doing it, trying to solve it, fix it. Do you remember we think of what the third one was?
We talked about the tactile. Some people learn visually, some people learn auditory, and the
tactile, yeah. Kinetic, is that like kinetic? Would that be like tactile?
Yeah.
Repetitive motion.
If you're writing and you see you're writing, you're seeing, and you're hearing, you have 3 inputs.
Yeah. So there's yeah. So there's
fits in with what you're saying.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah. But I definitely see like there's different ways people learn, and not a criticism, but I kind of feel like the monasteries I've always been in, it's always been like you learn, you listen to a Dhamma talk or you're reading a book, so it's all very intellectual, and that's the way we teach. Like if you go to the monastery on a Saturday night or whenever they give their Dhamma reflections, that's the way it's kind of taught. But I had this realization that that's not actually how monastics are taught. We sew our own robes. We don't have bowl stand down here, but in Thailand, they often, and they started doing this in Vaigiri, they make their bowl stands, and they're really quite intricate, really beautiful pieces of artwork. We crochet the bowl covers that are on there. There's a whole creativity in cleaning. It's like most forest monasteries are immaculately clean. I met some guest at, or someone came to offer the meal at the Pacific Hermitage up in Washington, and I was like, "You look familiar." She goes, "Yeah, I was a guest at Abhayagiri, and you were the work monk." And she said, for the morning chore, you had me cleaning a perfectly clean hallway. And I was like, "Yeah, that's what we do at forest monasteries." There wasn't any dust there, but she swept for a half hour. What's he having me do? Be creative. Find some dirt somewhere. Yeah, so let's see if there are any other questions. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, so just with creativity, it's like I did find that the way monastics usually teach the world is just through one medium. So that's why I was like, okay, there's got to be other ways to do this. At Birkin, I was actually scheduled. We actually had the list and everything, had all the art supplies purchased. And I was going to do a 10-day retreat with Sakula from the Portland Friends of the Dhamma. She's an artist. And she was, her and I were going to do a 10-day retreat using creativity as a meditation retreat. And when I was with Father Damien, I did two icon retreats with him. I loved it because it was like, we got up at 4 a.m. We went to their morning service. We were part of their prayer service, had breakfast, did a little bit of chore cleanup. And then we had our session of learning and creativity. And we had the meal, joined their prayer service actually before the meal. Then you had the meal, a little bit of a break, and then we painted in the afternoon while the monastics were doing their kind of chores and work, and then came and joined them for evening tea. They had their dinner, we had tea, and then did their prayer service, and then we go and did a little more painting if we wanted to. And I was like, oh, that is so beautiful, just to like the structure for the retreat could be exactly like living in a monastery, just sort of, or a meditation retreat, having pujas, doing chanting, a little bit of helping the monastery, but then like when work periods were happening, that would be where we would do the creativity. But unfortunately that got canceled. So I was like, yeah, how can we teach about Buddhism and meditation also using creativity? So I got some ideas, but were there any other questions?
Yeah, there was the next.
Yeah, I can say when I was doing just that one painting of Ajahn Chah, I don't know if you were here when I started talking about this, but the very simple photograph of Ajahn Chah, I painted it every single day. So I probably did paint that painting. I was thinking the other day, like 100 times. It was probably closer to like 500 times, just doing it over and over and over and over again. One thing I learned, from that is just the perfection, what we call paramis, of just determination. So it's like you're developing all sorts of skills, not just sort of being able to draw better or understanding the colors and the techniques there, but you're developing effort to do it every day, determination, concentration, mindfulness as you're working. So all of the kind of path factors are being developed in that process of learning a skill and paying attention and being available for what you're learning. In terms of like I was mentioning this morning because I knew I was going to give this talk, so I was kind of thinking about it. For a Christian iconography, what you would do is like if you were an icon painter, professional icon painter, which done by a guild, and you wouldn't even necessarily have to be a monastic. You'd just be like maybe employed by a monastery or employed by an iconographer. And it's basically the shop that did the icon. There might be a master who would do like the overseeing of it. But the iconographer, and especially kind of now, if it is sort of monastic or like a religious person who's doing the iconography, you might get commissioned to do an icon, either just from whoever. And then what would happen would be you would actually take a period of time, like maybe a month, to study about the saint that you were going to be painting or being commissioned to do or seeing. You'd read up about the person, you'd study about them. You would fast, you would meditate and pray on the image, And then if the particular saint or person that you're going to be doing an icon of, you would read about them, and if they had particular qualities or practices that they did, you actually might even do like a self-retreat for a week or two, just taking on their practices. Mm-hmm. So you'd actually kind of get an intellectual understanding of what that person was doing or what they were about. And they say that people who are really skilled, like if you were known for, as an individual and you were an icon painter, if you were known for wisdom and you were doing an icon about wisdom, many people who actually know how to read icons, because iconography means language or writing. So it is a visual language. I could get into another hour just talking about that. They say that if iconographer understands that quality about that person, it shows up in the painting. Mm-hmm. And it's really you kind of have to take it on faith unless you actually do know how to read an icon. There's a whole art in that. But there are icons that are supposedly or are said to have like miraculous powers and things, and that does come through. And so you're learning these things as an icon, even if you didn't master it and couldn't portray it in the painting. But you are taking teachings and you're learning them. And I was still kind of in the beginning, I'd say beginning stages, understanding iconography. A lot of them can come from visions, like say you're doing the prayers and the fasting. And so after I was doing some travels, and I spent a year actually living in a Catholic monastery. I lived for 20 years at a Bayagiri. And then when I left there, I spent a year at a Catholic monastery as part of a fellowship studying iconography. And I wanted to be able to write Buddhist iconography. I wanted to be able to do that. So when I first came to be on a retreat at Birken, I was given a year to be on retreat. I don't think of it as prayer, but I was praying to see an image that I'd be able to paint. And I actually got a Christian image popped up into my head, and it was kind of a dream. And I told Ajahn Son, and he goes, "Oh, that's Mark. That's the story of Mark 2:23." And so I looked it up, and then I started using all the imagery that I had inside this dream that I had right after having this prayer that I wanted to see an icon, and I did it. And then a couple of my good friends are Catholic iconographers, and I sent it to them, and they go, "That is fascinating." And so the painting that I did was kind of a template for how to do that. It wasn't a kind of complete finished painting, but I was hoping that I would get good enough that I would have visions to be able to do icons of Buddhist imagery. I always felt too self-conscious, and it's like, I didn't want to try to do a painting of Mahamoggallana, or my image of the Buddha. It's almost like, because if you look at, Buddhist iconography, it's like, images of like, this Buddha here looks very different from the Buddha that's upstairs, and the mm-hmm. Buddha that's over there, and the Buddha that's over there. They all are very, very different. And I don't know, it just didn't feel right to me to sort of say, this is what the Buddha looked like. And maybe I shouldn't, because it's like, well, there's already thousands and thousands of images that it shouldn't have bothered me, but it kind of did. Maybe if I get back into iconography, that'll be something that's my fear, right? I need to look at that fear and then try to overcome that. Let's see, we've been talking now for, I saw the time on there a little bit. So we're over an hour. I appreciate everybody's plugging in for the Jody Paulo's ramblings. Let's see here. Were there any other questions?
Maybe if you go down
the other direction.
Yeah.
So if I didn't get to your questions, I apologize. I was kind of distracted with showing images and asking people other questions, or just into my own voice. I'm not sure. But, thank you, everybody, and thank you to Aya and Bante for suggesting this.
Antamayang tamo wanakatayo sadhu karangadamasi sadhu 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 anumodami.
Then we hit exit.
And